Well, welcome back to the show. I am here. This is a historical and probably hysterical, but historical and revolutionary week. We are putting 4 people on the show. We've never done it before.
We should tell everybody what happened before the show when we tried to squeeze 4 of us on here.
The problem is that
Phil fell off the stage.
4 people don't really fit on the show, and we only have 3 mics. So Christian and I are sharing a mic.
We're sharing.
Hi, we're sharing because
Hi.
that's biblical.
It is.
Isn't it? Is sharing one of the fruits of the Spirit?
I'm sure it must be in somebody's version.
Love, love, love.
Love. So Christian and I are sharing a mic because we do have a special guest, but we'll get to that in a bit. I'm here with Sky Jatani.
Hi.
Hi, Sky. How are you?
I'm all right.
Hey, you're wearing some colors.
Yeah, the
Sky
stripes.
You got stripes
I
and
got
they're
stripes.
blue.
Yes.
Wow, that's awesome.
Okay.
Keep up the good work. And Christian.
Wait a minute. You're still in black. You look like Vader on the show.
Thank you. And Christian, we do not turn the attention to the host.
Well, you critique me for wearing dark
Yes.
too much, but you're
That's acceptable.
so
Yes.
you're calling the kettle black.
Hi, Christian.
Hi, Phil.
Aren't you two sharing a mic?
Yes, we are sharing a mic.
we are.
And I am sharing my color with him because.
What?
Yeah. See,
black.
I know, but I want to liven you up a little.
Yes.
So I will
You're
be happy
lending
to
me-
lend you some of
You're
my
lending me color.
color.
And we do have a guest today. Our guest is Dr. John Walton,
Yay!
Welcome back.
Woohoo!
friend of the show.
Is this your 3rd time?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think it's
Why
Be
don't
the
you
most invited
scoot
guest?
in a little more towards your mic so that you're not quieter than all the rest of
And you don't want to fall off the stage.
Yeah, okay.
And
Yes, I
technically
think it's my
Christian's
3rd time, yes.
Yeah, 3rd time at least.
It's a charm.
I think, yeah,
Yeah.
3 maybe.
Sounds right.
Yeah, okay. Maybe 4. No, 3.
Our listeners will tell us.
Are you going to sing like Christopher Walken?
No, I didn't do any research. Do you know why? Because the last time we recorded a podcast was yesterday.
Yeah, but they don't know that.
I know they don't know that, but now they do because next week is spring break for all of us, and we're all
all
out of
gone.
town except for.
I already
Dr.
had
Walton.
spring
You already
break,
had your
yeah.
spring break
I'm
in
back.
college, but Wheaton Public Schools spring break is next week, and so we're all out of town, and we can't do a podcast, so we had to do 2 this week because we don't want to let you guys down because you're paying a lot for these weekly podcasts, and so we have to have one ready for you. So we're actually doing this one the day after we did the last one. You thunked your oranges to
Yeah.
that?
You're little cuties.
So I haven't practiced Christopher Walken because
Okay.
it was just yesterday that we brought that up. I did not go home and sit up late practicing Christopher Walken. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. Slend in here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Sky and Christian too. Sorry, I'm just flying.
Getting through
Go
it.
for it.
Flying. And we've got a guest. Dr. Walton's here for you. Prepare to be
Amazed.
confused, bedazzled. Hey, it's a podcast.
Disturbed.
London here.
Educated.
The podcast starts right here. The Bill Vischer podcast starts right here. Also, Buddy the dog is here.
Buddy is here, and he
is-
may end up in your lap by
He
the
may
time
end
it's
up
over.
in my lap. He's currently sleeping on the floor behind us. And Sky added another clue to what is Phil working on next.
The little chair, for those of you watching the video,
Yeah, if you're watching the video, last week there was a tiny chair.
now it has half of an occupant.
This week, is this like when God told Abraham to take the animals and cut them in half and
Right.
walk
So,
between the halves?
Phil, if you want to, if anyone can see
Yeah,
that
if
in the
you can
video.
see that, there's
Yeah.
a set of legs,
There you go.
tiny.
Uh-oh.
Nope, now there's not. They
there
fell
you
out of the
go.
chair.
That's all right.
Now you've ruined
That's all
the
right.
show. So tiny legs and a tiny chair. What could it all mean?
And so, if you weren't with us in our last episode, this is a foreshadowing, a harbinger of things.
Harbinger.
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 It's a hard G.
that.
Harbinger? No.
Harbinger.
Harbinger.
Harbinger. Okay.
Anyway.
Hey, do you need something to give your kids this Easter? Wouldn't
Yes.
you like a new children's book? Thank you.
Yes.
This is your rhetorical question. Wouldn't you like a new children's book from your favorite podcast host / voice of tomato? It's What is Easter? A new book written by Phil Vischer. That's me. I wrote an Easter book. It explains what Jesus has to do with Easter eggs and bunnies and how new life factors into all of that.
Wait a minute. Are those two bunnies at the empty tomb?
Yeah, there are two bunnies.
And an Easter egg.
Easter eggs.
And three puppets.
Celebrating, and Sunday School Lady and Buck Denver and Marcy are celebrating Jesus' resurrection.
Wow.
I don't think that's biblical.
Those are Christian bunnies.
Yeah, but
And Christian eggs?
where is like the angels and the soldiers and the disciples and the women?
They are left. The women just
okay.
left. The women were there and they left. And I got to turn this so you can see it. What?
Yeah, the women are on
Oh,
the back.
that's right. The women.
Oh, got it.
Back
Okay.
Bill was trying to tell me.
Yeah.
But yeah, go close up.
So I was saying, it's Mary and Martha. It's not supposed to be Sunday
Close
School
up
Lady
on me, Bill.
and Marcy.
So you explain
No,
why.
no, no, You're
Just
on the wide
switch-
shot. Switch to the close up on me.
So you explain why they call it.
Yay!
You explain why they call it Easter, right? No,
Uh-oh.
maybe not.
You should have been the consultant before he wrote the
On
book.
a kid's book, you can do like 400 words. This is not a
So he
John
explained
Walton
how
effort.
you can
how you can bring things together for your kids, so they're not just
Confused.
horribly confused. Okay, that's awesome. We don't have any news stories we're going to do today because we just did our news stories yesterday.
Well, actually, we didn't do news
We actually
stories
didn't do any
yesterday.
We did the mailbag.
We did the mailbag yesterday, which was last week, and now it's this week, this next week,
Which is a whole different week.
which is a whole different week. And so we have a special guest rather than waiting for more news, even though we never got around to doing any news.
So this podcast will be going up during Holy Week.
This is our Holy Week podcast.
Right.
So if you want to get your kids a new book for Holy Week, go to what'sinthebible.com or amazon.com. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get second-day shipping for free, or your local Christian bookstore, and pick up What is Easter from Phil Vischer, your favorite, whatever it is.
Yeah, well, they're going to need that 2-day shipping to get it by Easter.
I know. We should have done this yesterday.
Probably.
I mean, last week.
Right.
Well, what are we talking about
Okay,
today? If
we're
not doing
talking
news
about a
stories?
new book. We're talking about a new book. Dr. Walton is one of our favorite evangelical provocateurs.
Ooh,
Professor
title.
Professor at Wheaton College.
Professor of Old Testament. What's your official title?
Professor of Old Testament at Wheaton College.
That's it?
Yep.
That's all you got?
Yep, that's it.
You don't have like an honorary endowed chair or
No,
anything?
no.
They'll name it after him
Yeah.
when he's done.
Really?
sure.
Yeah.
Do you think there'll be a building named after you
I doubt
on
it.
campus at
I
some
doubt it,
point?
unless somehow I'm going to come up with some money to give them to build such a building.
Well,
From your book sales.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a chair. I mean, not an endowed chair,
an
just a
endowed
chair.
like this kind of chair.
Okay. So Dr. Walton's last book was The Lost World of Genesis 1, which we talked about at fairly great length a couple of years ago, and has led to lots of continual conversations because it talks about how we read Genesis 1. And the fundamental concept basically is, if we try to read it as the ancients would have thought about it, they probably were thinking more about functional origins than material origins.
Right.
Is that a good...
It's more about order than it is about stuff or objects.
Right. And
But the overarching idea is we need to engage these ancient texts through the lens of the cultures they were written to, not bringing or imposing modern questions upon the text that they were never intended to answer.
Correct, because when we read it with all of our modern issues and modern questions, we are in effect distorting the text. We're
Right.
making it something that it never was, and we can't hope to get the authority of it that
but
way.
it's inspired,
It is.
Are you?
so it can answer all my questions about
But our
everything.
questions are often not. That's the problem.
Well, hold on. Are you saying that it should be viewed more figuratively than literally?
No,
I didn't
no, I'm
think
not.
you were.
Thank you, Christian.
So, can you explain why that is? The difference, like the splitting of those hairs?
I am contending that we ought to read the text exactly for what it was written for. Okay? Lots of times with the literal and figurative discussion, it's kind of how we want to read it instead of how it was written. I want to.
That's a great idea. I love that
Did I
thought.
give a blurb on something? Anyway,
That was not Taco. I don't know.
That was Philo, the laptop. My wife is driving down from Minneapolis today, She's
Pinging you.
She's pinging me.
Yeah.
Is she
All right, so-
texting while she's driving?
Is she doing that
No,
figuratively?
no.
Figuratively or literally?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Both.
Okay, get back to what you were
Yeah.
saying.
So it's not like figurative and literal are the only two choices, or that they actually describe what we're doing. We're trying to read the text as it would have been intended to be read by the human author who was endowed with authority by God to write it. And so, in that sense, if the author intended it for it to be read kind of in a word-for-word, non-figurative way, we want to read it that way. If the author intended it to be understood figuratively or symbolically or allegorically or whatever else it might be, we should read it that way. The author's the one that's been endowed with authority from God, and we read it the way that he intended.
So the trick is to figure out
What he intended.
what he intended.
Yep, that's
And
always our
you
goal.
can't go to the authors and ask them.
Correct.
Because they're dead.
That's right.
That makes it tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But see, we're not trying to psychoanalyze them. We're assuming that they are competent and capable communicators. And we're just trying to enter that world of communication so that we understand it properly. That involves understanding the language that they used. It involves understanding the culture from which they come. And those are the things that help us to kind of get on the same wavelength as the author.
And some people have criticized your conclusions by saying, but this isn't how people have generally read this for, the last 2,000 years.
Right.
So how can you go against tradition?
And there are several different answers to that. One of them is, of course, that we call tradition, but throughout 2,000 years, there have been lots of differing, competing claims about this literature. And so it's not like we've got some monolithic, solid line. Everybody's always thought this one way. Secondly, I think that anybody in the church of any era, maybe I'm overstating that, would have said, well, we need to use whatever tools God gives us. Now, it's true that for a long time the church didn't want to use Hebrew and Greek. They wanted to use Latin. But people eventually came along and said, no, we really have to use the Hebrew and the Greek. That's a tool that God's given us that helps us to understand better, and we need to use it. And the same is true with the ancient world. The ancient world is known to us through the texts, and those texts have only been unearthed over the last 150 years.
Right.
And
So we have a whole new world of reference
Exactly.
material that they didn't have 200 years ago.
Exactly. And so
And you spend a lot of time in that world.
I do. Yes.
Can you read Akkadian?
Yes, I can.
Wow.
Really?
Really?
Yes.
What about cuneiform?
Cuneiform is Akkadian.
Oh.
No, actually,
like you knew that, Phil. Give me a break.
Let me correct that.
Everybody knows
Cuneiform is the form of writing
Oh, it's like
that
hieroglyphics.
Akkadian
Right, I got
uses.
it.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So
It's the little clay
but-
tablets with the little
Yeah.
things, looks like chicken
Crest.
feet.
But the Hittite also uses cuneiform, and Ugaritic also uses cuneiform.
Got it.
So that's a
Chickens also
form
use
of
cuneiform.
and they do it well, better than any of us actually. It comes naturally. To them.
Even when I took archaeology classes as an undergrad, and I would see those pictures of the little clay. How on earth did they even read that at the time? Because there's so much packed into those little tiny tablets that.
Well, that tells us something very interesting. Most of the tablets and inscriptions and all of those things were really not written for people to read.
Right.
They were written sometimes to give an archival storage of something. Many times, royal inscriptions were written for the gods to read. And so it didn't matter how small you wrote.
Very little gods. Yeah. That sat in very little chairs.
With their good eyes.
They just have good eyesight, yes. So in that sense, they weren't really written so that people could
Because
read
people
them.
weren't mostly literate.
Right.
So what did it matter?
Right, oral culture.
There you go.
Fascinating. Okay, and so some of the conclusions, and your first book, did raise some eyebrows because if you conclude that Genesis 1 isn't a story of material origins, then your conclusion is that in terms of, the science of creation, the Bible doesn't really speak to it.
Right. It doesn't make any claims about something like the age of the earth.
I bet that made you a lot of enemies.
Yeah, well, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it made me a lot of friends, too.
Did it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it
There's
goes-
always
it
people
goes
on both
ways.
sides. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
most things in life.
Yeah.
It cuts both ways. Okay, and now you have a new book. So
New
that was
book.
The Lost World of Genesis 1.
So we've lost another world.
we found another lost world. Is your next one The Lost World of Atlantis?
No, that's not on the not
Is
on
it the
chart.
lost world of Noah?
Some people would like me to write a Lost World of the Flood. I don't know if that's going to happen yet or not.
The new book is called The Lost World of Adam and Eve. What could be controversial about that? Okay.
Most everything.
Subtitle is Genesis 2 and 3 and the Human Origins Debate. Ooh, with contributions by N.T. Wright.
That's right.
He did not contribute to.
No, he didn't. No.
I asked him to.
Yeah,
he said, "No, I'm busy writing about Adam and Eve for John Walton, who is more scholarly than you are." Okay, so let's get into this. The new book. One thing that was key as I was reading it like the night before last, trying to get through it, is that as you interpret this stuff, that you believe some Hebrew words we can oversimplify in how we interpret them. That we may pick, even in translations that we use, that there's more nuance or more ways to apply a Hebrew word, than we let on.
Yeah, the basic key is that a Hebrew word and its meaning cannot necessarily be reduced to an English word. I mean, it's how it is in languages.
Why?
Because different languages and cultures organize their thinking in different ways, and the language is a reflection of how they've organized their thinking and expressed themselves. We know very well that there are words in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, sometimes even common ones, that we have no suitable English translation for.
Like Hesed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which means?
Depends how you translate it. That's the problem.
We can't tell you.
It has to do with covenant love and loyalty. It's often translated love or charity or loving kindness or things like that.
The love of the Lord, you'll sometimes hear that term.
Is it sort of like, I speak Spanish, and in Spanish the word together is juntos. And in that word, to me, it like encapsulates more than just the English word together.
Right.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
it's that concept.
Right.
It means together with nachos.
Juntos just is
Well,
more complete understanding of together than together.
This is part of the reason why traditional Muslims don't like the Quran to be translated out of Arabic, because any act of translation in their view is an act of violence, a corruption of the text. So,
And some of the key words that you think can trip us up in the first few chapters of Genesis are the words that are often translated into create and to make.
And form and things of that sort, yes.
Yeah, which the words are bara
Bara,
and asa.
asa, and yatsar,
What's that one?
formed.
Oh, okay. Okay. And those we typically
Well, we typically assume, because of our worldview and our culture, we typically assume that those words are material in nature, that they deal with material activity, bringing some kind of material object into existence. We attribute to them a materiality. After all, when we have the phrase, God made whatever it is, we say, see? See, that's a material thing.
He made the stars, there they are.
Right.
He made the...
But that's an assumption on our part that Hebrew verb asa is really covering that same territory.
right. And you say it can also be translated as provided.
Sure. I mean, God makes garments for Adam and Eve. Okay, so what do we think he did there?
He sat down and he sewed them with a needle and thread.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, see, well,
but you're saying it could be he
yeah,
provided them.
there's all kinds of processes, right? Processes
He provided
involved.
the animal for them to skin.
Who knows,
Or the leaves.
So what I've concluded in that chapter is that verb asa, which we typically, when you learn Hebrew, it's one of the first verbs you learn, and you learn that it means to do or to make. Well, those two are very different things in English, to do and to make.
Yeah.
And the word occurs some 2,600 times in the Hebrew Bible, so it's very difficult to look through all of them. And
You have to get it in the context to understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But what I've demonstrated by accumulating all of those different occurrences is to say this verb asa means that the person who's the subject, who's doing this asa, is somehow, somewhere along the line involved in a causation process, whether it's acting, doing, or whether it's making, but it doesn't indicate direct causation. It could be very.
It could be direct
It could.
causation,
It could.
but not necessarily
Right.
direct causation.
Exactly. So we can't say, well, wait a minute. It says God made. Well, God made you and me. The Bible says that too.
Right.
Same verb. So what's God's role?
But it
in
doesn't.
that?
That doesn't imply that our creation was limited only to his direct
Correct.
action. There were
Exactly.
obviously, other agents
Right.
involved.
Right.
Called our parents.
Yes.
So asa does not indicate what level of causation,
Right.
direct or indirect, ultimate or
So
whatever.
what you've done is read lots of ancient literature to say how did other ancients in the Near East think about these things, these concepts, these ideas. Gone back to the Hebrew to say, okay, how many different ways is this verb used, throughout the Bible, throughout Hebrew writing, and then taken it to Genesis 1 and now Genesis 2 and 3, and come up with, I like how you write, because you write with propositions. Say this, I have
Yes.
15 propositions for you.
Yes.
Instead of chapters. Other people have chapters.
No, but this allows people to see that this is developing an argument.
Right.
I'm going somewhere with this.
Yeah. But, also, just the way you just said that, it sounded like I start with the ancient Near East, and I really don't. I start with the biblical text.
Okay.
See, because some people accuse me of saying, well, you're taking this pagan mythology and you're driving it into the Bible to make the Bible something that, in fact, God was trying to work them out of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Are you?
No, I'm not.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
So I start with the text and figure out what the text is saying. Then I want to take that, once I've understood that in Hebrew and in ancient Israelite culture, in the biblical context, then I want to say, is what's happening in the ancient Near East similar, or is it different, or is it a little of each? How's that work? And in that way, what we find out from the ancient Near East can stand as kind of undergirding, substantiating what conclusions we already drew based on the text of the Old Testament.
So, like, one example that comes to my mind is when you read what the Pentateuch says about the creation of the tabernacle and the temple, the structure of it, the shape of it, the design of it, the decorations of it. It's all there. You can study it and understand. And then you suddenly realize, oh, there are other examples in other ancient Near Eastern cultures of very similar temples.
Absolutely.
And very similar designs. So it isn't that you're studying those ancient cultures first and imposing them on the Bible.
Right.
It's there in the Bible. And oh, by the way, it's verified by other cultures around as well.
Right.
Okay. So now let's get this. So the new book, The Lost World.
What's the name of it?
Yeah. The Lost World of Adam and Eve. Available now on Amazon.
Yes.
And at your local Christian bookstore.
And you can get it in 2 days.
And you can get it in 2 days if you're an Amazon Prime member.
Yeah.
If you're giving it as an Easter gift,
An Easter gift. Put it in your Easter basket.
Send them together.
One of these two books will offend no one.
So, go ahead.
I don't think that's true. I think some people are going to have a problem with your book as well.
I have a problem with bunny rabbits.
Bunnies worshiping Jesus.
painted eggs, on the cover.
You just want to split hairs.
I split the last of my hairs a long time ago.
No, your hair's just
So
split.
this book is about Adam and Eve.
That's eerie.
So let's start with the first proposition that makes you go, oh, wow, okay, unpack that. Proposition number 6, Adam, the word Adam is used...
Adam.
Used in generous 1 through 5, Genesis 1 through 5, in a variety of ways.
That's true.
What does that
I agree entirely. Thanks for making that point, Phil.
Hey, this isn't me. I'm not saying this. What do you mean, a variety of ways?
Well, for instance, sometimes it has the definite article on it. Now, in English, right, the.
Well, Adam?
Yeah, which means that it's not a personal name. Hebrew does not put definite articles in a personal name, just like English doesn't, except the Donald.
What about the edge?
The Edge?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bono's.
From you two.
The Sting.
Yeah, see?
No, he's not the
There's no.
Sting.
He's just
The
Sting.
Oprah.
The Donald. Yeah.
Donald.
The Donald.
The E Street Band.
The Queen.
Yeah.
Queen.
So, yes, Hebrew does not do that, and therefore, when it has a definite article, which is just about every occurrence in Genesis 2 and 3, this is not the guy's name. It's talking about a human. That's what Adam
The
means
man.
in
The man,
Hebrew.
basically.
Right.
He's the man.
right.
So Adam is a Hebrew word that means human.
Right.
Are you guys really saying that in Hebrew it's pronounced Adam?
It is.
It,
yes.
it is?
it
Oh,
is.
see, I thought you were just being silly.
And Aveh,
Oh, it is?
that's Eve.
Chava.
Is it?
Yeah, there's a chet on there. Yeah.
There's a chet.
Chava. Yeah.
You need phlegm to say
Chava.
the
Yeah.
name of Adam's wife? Okay.
So the Adam.
But you know, Adam didn't call Eve Chava, and Eve did not call Adam Adam.
how can you say that?
How can you
Those
say
were
that?
their names.
Here we go.
Yes, but those are Hebrew, and Hebrew did not exist until the middle of the second millennium. So there was no Hebrew, and therefore they couldn't have called each other by Hebrew names. Just saying.
That's a good point.
See, that's kind of a
That's like mind-blowing.
That's a brain blower right there. So Adam and Eve
So what do you think they called each other?
weren't named.
If it was Adam and Steve, we're in big trouble.
That's universal, all languages. Yeah.
So, okay, Adam and Eve were not called Adam and Eve until
The Hebrews gave them
until
names.
the Hebrews wrote this story down.
Right.
Probably.
I mean, maybe they
But,
translated.
but you said it's mostly written with the definite article. So
Yes.
even there, it's not the
Right.
names
They didn't
Adam and
give
Eve.
them
Right.
Right.
names.
Right.
It's more the English
Okay,
translations.
what are the implications of that?
Well, it's just to recognize that we've got an Israelite account written to Israelites at a particular period. This is not an account written by God or the angel Gabriel or something to Adam and Eve.
Or by Adam and Eve themselves.
Or by Adam and Eve themselves. It's
This is much later.
It's an Israelite
and they
account.
Are, okay, so assuming it was, traditional Moses. Moses originated these stories, wrote them down, did something, collected them, whatever, and named them.
He refers to them as Adam and Eve. Whether they were already known as that at
Yeah.
that time, we can't really say. But
So what are the implications of the fact that it's the proper
okay,
the definite article?
the definite article suggested something like the primal man. It's something that identifies a little more generically rather than here's his personal name, Adam. By the time you get to chapter 5, it is a personal name. It does not have the definite article. Adam became the father of Seth. That's a personal name.
But that's chapter 5.
But that's chapter
How
5.
did that morph like that then?
Well, again,
How did it happen?
yes, well, we don't know. But at some point in the text, they begin talking about Adam as an individual, which of course I believe he was. I want to say that several times.
Believe in a
Historical Adam, a real person in a real past, okay, but not with a real name in a sense, not that name. But at some point, the text becomes interested in him as an individual rather than interested in him as a larger persona. That's represented in that direct up. That's, of course, what I call, which we're going to talk about, an archetype.
Okay.
Right.
So next proposition 7, the second creation account can be viewed as a sequel to Genesis 1.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
is that?
Rather than a recapitulation.
What's the,
Right.
the
Yeah.
traditional
Yeah.
is this is part of the Genesis 1 expanded?
Well, usually we assume that Genesis 2 is giving you more information about day 6.
Which is in
Right.
Genesis 1.
Yeah,
that
which
God
is in
created
Genesis
the man
1.
and the woman in
Right.
his own image.
But of course, Genesis 1 doesn't say there were just two. Genesis 1 does not mention Adam and Eve. Genesis 1 talks about humanity, male and female, he created them. And
So pause right there.
yes,
Hang on.
It's a Christian pause.
So are you saying that he could have created more than one person at one time?
that's logically possible.
So, yeah.
And in the ancient Near East, they did.
This is a pretty important point because this is one of the areas of the book that will probably snag people at first, which is the idea that Adam and Eve may have been two individuals who were part of, in fact, a larger population of humans at the beginning in this primordial time. So unpack where you kind of get that idea.
I'm only raising that as a possible reading.
Right.
I don't really weigh in on it one way or the other, but it's a reading we have to consider possible.
It's not excluded by the text.
Right.
Yeah.
Because again, chapter 1 kind of is very broad-based in what it has to say. It also makes some sense when we get to chapter 4. Cain finds a wife. Now,
Where did that come from? Where'd she come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I mean,
Well, clearly mail order.
From a different planet.
yeah, it was an internet thing.
Well,
but
from Venus.
It's where women are from.
That's right.
I mean,
From Venus.
Yes.
people have had answers for that, but it's the sister answer, and that's not a great one. You know,
It's kinda creepy.
Yeah,
Yeah, they didn't do creepy things in the Bible.
But then it talks about, Cain's driven away, and he says, well, now anybody who finds me will kill me.
right.
So who are those people?
Who's this anybody?
The animals.
Right.
Mom and dad.
And then he forms a city.
Forms a city.
Populated by whom?
You can't make a city for yourself.
Yeah,
Now,
you can. I play SimCity
Quite
all the
frankly,
time.
I have always thought that myself.
Now,
Where
the
do these
answer
other people come from?
people have had answers to that, and they say, well, by this time, they're living a long time, so they're having lots and lots and lots and lots of babies, and so we're already into second, third generations of things, and of course that's an assumption. The text doesn't give us
possible.
that. Yeah, so that's the answer that people have given over the ages, but again, there's no reason not to consider this option as well.
Okay, so next proposition, because we all know the story of Adam being formed out of the dust. God formed him from the dust and breathed into his nostrils, and bing, he woke up. And then he made Eve by putting Adam to sleep, taking out his rib, a little surgery, uses more dust. Does it say anything about more dust?
No.
Just the rib.
Just the rib. That was all it took to build a whole woman?
Yeah.
And that, yeah.
We don't need much.
Okay.
You know how they make
Proposition
Scottish
9,
women?
So this is
How's that?
Out of McRibs.
This is your.
Sorry.
This is your proposition. Forming of humans in ancient Near Eastern accounts. Oh, I'm sorry. Forming from dust and building from ribs are archetypal claims, not claims of material origin. Unpack
How do you
that.
substantiate that? Oh, okay.
Yes. How do you unpack that?
I unpack that, again, first of all, by looking at the words. When it says that God formed Adam from dust, again, we've already established formed is not an inherently material word. It can be material in nature, but it's not inherently so. Zechariah 12:1 says that God formed the human spirit within us. But then you have to ask, okay, what's going on with dust? When we read it as moderns, one of the first things we think about is chemistry. Dust has this silicon kind of thing, and
These are the properties.
People are made from stardust, kind of, in the Big Bang there, and they start thinking chemistry. But wait, the ancient Israelite audience and author are not thinking about chemistry. Their periodic table is very small. They
have 4 elements. Are they still in the earth, wind, and fire?
Yeah.
phase?
So they're not thinking chemistry. So we shouldn't think chemistry. Okay.
Why does earth, wind, and fire, the band, not have water? Why did they pick 3 elements, not
He kept running away.
4? Water kept running away, the 4th.
Yeah.
He was corrosive.
What a drain.
It's so sad. This whole thing is sad. Okay, wait a minute. But
So
my assumption had always been that, when you have a dead body of any fleshly creature, it eventually, especially in an arid and dry climate, it turns to dust,
Exactly.
right? It deteriorates.
Exactly.
So
Came into dust.
Exactly.
you will return.
Genesis 3:19.
So it would be natural for them just working backwards that, well, this must be what we are made out of.
Sure.
But God's breath and life needs to be put into us to make us alive.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
dust pertains to not chemistry, but mortality.
Right, but couldn't it also be the physical stuff? Not
Yes,
just the
but
concept or
why
idea?
does the text ever mention the physical stuff? Not because of chemistry, but because of mortality.
Right.
And
I'm a little lost on that
yes,
one. Okay, so what you're saying then is the word dust in Hebrew mean actual dust?
Yes.
First of all?
Yes.
Yes. So you're saying when
not
they
clay. So you
Not
can't
clay.
shape it.
Right.
just powdery stuff.
Yeah.
So you're saying when they said made out of dust, it's that they died, they turned into dust, and so that's what we're saying they must have used to make us.
Or is it just an introduction of the concept
It's
of mortality?
saying this is clearly what you are because you turn back into it. But it does introduce mortality. And again, that's how dust is used for human beings throughout the Bible, Old
Right.
Testament, New Testament.
It's when they put dust and ashes on themselves, it was a sign of mourning and death and
Right.
all of that.
So that's a Near East.
Sure.
Yeah, Ash
that-
Wednesday, we still
right.
do that as a
But it's in
symbol
the
of our
Bible,
own
too.
mortality.
Right.
I mean,
Sinfulness.
Paul, 1 Corinthians 15, the first man was of dust and all are from dust. I mean, this is what we are.
When it sounds like it was the language that they talked in a lot. Like that was a very common.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so the implications of that.
Are
Okay.
I believe you jump to the implication that humans, get ready for this, Christian.
All right.
That humans in the Bible were not created immortal.
Correct.
Dum, dum, dum.
Really?
What leads you to that?
Well, first of all, they were made from dust, and that's the stuff of mortality. Secondly, the first thing that happens, God sets up this garden, and he puts in it a tree of life.
I knew that.
Immortal people don't need a tree of life.
You're right.
And
That's
so,
logical.
right from the start, I mean, the insinuation is that they have a need of a tree of life, which means that they are indeed mortal. Now, most people decide that they were not created mortal because they think Paul says otherwise. So when Paul says in Romans 5 that people are subject to death because of sin, they conclude that therefore before sin they did not die. But that's not what Paul says.
Okay, this is a huge issue.
Yeah.
It is.
You know this, right?
Yes, I
This
do.
is a huge issue.
This
I
is
don't see a problem
I think
with
we
this
have
at all.
to. We need to step back in case the lightning comes. Right?
This is a huge, but this is also one of the arguments for against evolution is that there can't have been evolution because that would mean there was death
Right.
before the fall.
Exactly.
And there can't be death before the fall because death was a result of the fall.
Right.
Dr. Walton.
what Paul says is that we are subject to death. We as human beings are subject to death because of sin. Now, go back to the Garden of Eden scenario. They arguably, what I'm suggesting, they were created mortal, but they were given a tree of life, which means that they were given an antidote, a remedy. Okay?
But they were told not to touch that remedy.
No, that's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's
Right.
the wisdom tree.
There's two trees, remember?
What?
2 trees.
There's two
There are
trees.
2 trees?
Yeah. Seriously?
No, seriously, I'm so
Hang on.
sorry.
Okay.
We gotta
Really?
take a Christian pause.
Okay.
Wait, I really only
Yeah.
thought there
How
was
many
one
fingers
tree.
am I holding up?
There's 2 trees in the
The
garden.
deal is okay.
Remember, because after they're kicked out of the garden, they're barred from getting access to the tree of life.
They eat of the tree of wisdom, the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
And they're prevented from accessing the tree of life.
I thought that was just like some sort of text mix-up or something, and then I really thought, I don't know, I really only thought there was one
and then
tree.
at the end in Revelation.
That's what my books all have. They just have one tree with the apple on it.
So you're just looking at the children's Bible pictures? Is that it? And it's
I
not an
thought it was
apple
the
either, by the
same.
way.
It's not an apple.
Okay, so hang on. So
a
they
pomegranate.
ate from the knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
But
The
they-
wisdom tree.
The wisdom tree. But there's a life tree.
Yeah.
I didn't
Right.
know that.
Okay.
And only the life
I'm
tree
feeling
shows
really
up in Revelation?
stupid.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
so wisdom.
Oh,
we
see,
have it
it's
now?
already have it, yeah.
Revelation. That's why. I haven't gotten
So, they have the remedy there, the tree of life, which is an antidote to their mortality.
Their dustiness.
When they sin,
It's like the Swiffer.
then they're kicked out of the garden. The mean, nasty cherub guardian is there blocking the way, so they can't get to the tree of life. And that is explicitly what it says. They can't get to the tree of life. That means that they're now subject to their mortality, to death, because of sin, because sin brought them loss of access to the tree of life.
Now, hang on 1 minute.
Talk to Paul, don't talk to me.
Hang on.
Christian and 1,200 other people just said.
Now, hang on just 1 minute. So, are you implying that before the fall, every day they would go and eat of the tree of life, and that's how they kept living?
No, I'm not implying that because I don't know. But the tree of life was available to them. It was not prohibited.
Right.
So I don't know what they did or didn't do. I can't tell unless the text tells me.
Made a lotion out of its fruit and rubbed
They,
it on like
they still
sunscreen.
sell it down at the Dead Sea.
But one thing we do know for
See
sure,
Chavav, he'll get it for you.
it is they did shut that door and they couldn't get back into
Right.
the tree
Right.
of life.
Exactly.
Which is why it makes such poetic imagery at the end of Revelation when the way is opened and the nations have access to the tree of life, and it says its leaves are used for the healings of the nation and all that. That's all in Revelation because the way's been opened again.
Right.
Which is why everybody is after, like the garden and the fountain of youth, right?
That's not in the Bible.
No, it isn't. But it's sort of the same thing. Like, everybody's...
It's immortality.
They want this immortality. They're chasing after this.
When Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
So in the next proposition...
Yeah, what's the next proposition?
No, because we didn't get through that one very much.
Yeah, well, okay, I have a question based on the whole Adam Eve thing. So the traditional reading is God creates Adam, and then later he puts Adam into a deep sleep and does some kind of physical surgery on him, removes his rib. Again, traditional understanding, even though the language isn't quite right.
Watch me pull a woman out of your rib.
Right, and then takes the rib and forms his companion, Eve, out of it, and then they wake up and here you go, marriage. But you have a different interpretation.
Indeed.
And this is the one that I think, that combined with the that there may have been other human beings other than Adam and Eve, this is the other part of the book that I thought people are going to flip out about.
Oh, they
So I
can
can't
find all
wait.
kinds
They're
of
going to
things.
think you're crazy?
No, I think it's a point of view that really needs to be grappled with because it's
All
an
right, let
important.
me hear this one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. This translation, rib, where do we get it? It's not what's represented in the Septuagint or the Aramaic or the Latin or things of that sort. This is the only place in the Bible where this word is used and translated rib.
And this
the word?
the word is used elsewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's it translated to in other places?
It's never even an anatomical term elsewhere.
Well, what's the word?
The word is tsela, and it's used typically as an architectural term. So it's this side of the temple and that side of the temple and this side of the altar and that side of the altar, this side of the ark and that side of the ark. It refers to the side of something, and typically when there are two of them. Okay, so when this says that God took one of Adam's sides, not one of his ribs, there's no reason to translate it rib.
So where did the rib translation originate? Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know who did it first. I do know
was the rib
that
salesman.
as early as the 3rd and 4th century AD, some of the rabbis were already arguing about it and saying, no, it can't be rib, and that it was side. So this argument goes way back.
So it means side more appropriately.
Side. So we talk about a rack of ribs. We talk about a side of beef. Those kinds of things.
Side of Adam.
Yeah, a side
you
of
like a
Adam.
side of Adam
yeah,
with that?
yeah. I mean, after all, Adam knows that it's not just a bone. He says, she's bone of my bone and
Flesh of my
Flesh of my
flesh.
flesh.
bingo.
Yeah.
So Adam knows that it is not just a rib that's been extracted. Basically, God's cut him in half. A side of beef.
Gravy.
Yeah, it
Can't
might
put
be
that
good
in a
gravy.
children's
Okay,
Bible.
but
Kinda
see,
gruesome.
it's only gruesome when you think that this is an actual surgical procedure.
Right.
Why should Israelites think of an actual surgical procedure?
Because it says I cut you in half.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when it says that he put him to sleep, we say, "Oh, anesthesia." Do Israelites know anything about
No,
anesthesia?
they don't know
No,
that.
they don't.
They had strong wine. Come on.
Yeah.
They
No, they had bite this
Hard
rope.
sticks. Yeah,
this
bite this rope.
Yeah, okay. So now we have to do Hebrew again. We have to look around at this deep sleep thing and find out what that usually pertains to.
What does it pertain to?
Let me tell you. I'm so excited about this. Okay, it's used in two different ways. In the first way, it pertains to a situation where there is imminent danger and the person doesn't know it because they're asleep. So Jonah's asleep in the bottom of the boat. He doesn't know that the boat's thinking about breaking up, even though breaking up's hard to do. Saul.
The jokes to us.
I don't know. I liked it.
Saul is asleep in the camp when David's creeping in and grabs the spear, and so danger is imminent.
So it's a deep sleep in which you're
Yeah.
unaware of what's going on around you.
Sisera, goes to Jael's tent because he thinks he'll find protection there. Instead, she pulls out the warm milk and then the tent peg and drives it through his head. Okay, danger. Now, I don't think that works here in Genesis 2.
Right.
Woman coming danger. No, it doesn't do that. Okay?
Little did he know.
Does it have to include the danger component, or is it just somebody
It always does.
somebody who's so out of it
Yeah.
in sleep that they're completely unaware of what's going
In
on.
the context where it's used, it does.
Okay.
But the other...
That's one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've just knocked him
the
off.
tiny
Yeah, yeah.
man.
Yeah. Oh, his legs came out. This is like half of him.
Yeah. So
It's a rib.
All right, so there are two ways that
he
this
didn't know
word can be
danger was
taken.
lurking.
There it is.
The other way is the important one.
Okay.
The other one is that the sleep doesn't have to do with danger that's lurking. It has to do with a visionary experience. Abraham is put into a deep sleep when he's cut the animals in half. Speaking of that, he's cut the animals in half, and he's put into a deep sleep, and the torch and the censer pass through the parts, and the covenant is ratified. Important
In a vision.
theological moment in a vision.
Yeah.
Daniel, in a vision, he keeps falling over into a deep sleep and has visions in chapters 9 and 10. Okay, so the idea that Adam, since there's no danger looming, Adam is being put into a state where he sees a vision. And in this vision, he sees not the surgeon with the mask. In this vision, he sees himself actually being cut in two. And from one half, presumably the better half, so we're told, God builds Eve.
So, in other words, this is not an account of how women or a woman was physically created, but it's a vision Adam has in which it is then revealed to him that this female counterpart of your species is actually
The same as you.
Of the same flesh.
Same as you, yep.
Okay.
He went through, wasn't good for him to be alone, so he went through the animals looking for a helper, but they weren't the same as him. Now he's shown woman is not just another one of the creatures, woman is the same as you.
So in that interpretation, Eve might have been wandering around already, and Adam was saying, intriguing, but
Yeah.
is that
Did he
one of
really?
me?
Did he really need God's help figuring out that one goes where a match?
Intriguing, but I don't know. She seems from Venus, and I am from Mars.
Well, what this is telling me, most importantly, and correct me if I'm wrong,
No,
which I know you all will, but what it seems to me is that there are other possibilities other than what I have conceived to be true about the text. It's not just as cut and dry as my English Bible may seem to say.
Or the pictures in the children's
Or
Bible?
the pictures in the children's book, right.
So what if the original author, original audience was more concerned with the theological implications than the scientific implications of what they were writing and or...
It's even more than theology, if you want me to correct that now.
Yes, correct me now, please.
Before you get too
it
far.
is theology, but it's also basic identity. Who are we? You know, we're frail mortals. We're dust. We're gendered pairs. We're ontological equals. Sorry about that, but we're the same essence, same nature, and so
And we're
it's
created in the image of God to go to Genesis 1.
It's about who we are, identity.
Is there a richer meaning ontologically, theologically, in this interpretation than in the surgical interpretation?
I think so, yeah. I think so, because even when we treat it all as material origins, we're giving too high a value to materiality, too high a value to biology, and not recognizing the larger issues of ontology and identity and theology and who we are relating to one another and to God.
Okay, can I ask the culturally and politically charged question right now?
May as well.
Good way to wrap
Because this is
things
not in your
up.
book, but it was something that I was wondering about. Does the interpretation that you are advocating for here in any way bring into question the traditional, historical, Orthodox Christian understanding about marriage?
No. It doesn't challenge the normal understanding of marriage. It doesn't challenge the normal understanding of sin. It doesn't challenge that there actually was a person, real past, Adam and Eve. The whole theological premise is in place. And in fact, I think that this gives a stronger emphasis to some of the theological and important
Do you
issues.
run into any trouble with Paul?
No. I had N.T. Wright write that part of the chapter because, if I was going to say anything different from a purely traditional view of Romans, people would say, well, what do you know, Walton? You're an Old Testament person. You don't know
right.
anything
What do
about
you know?
that. So that was why I wanted to have somebody in New Testament write that, and that way he can take the heat. But again, we
Way to pass the buck.
Like your first book, then, and again, you need to, if you're interested, go get the book and read it. And you should read the first one too, Lost World of Genesis 1. like your first book, the implications for origins, for, do we need to resist? What theories do we need to resist or accept? Your conclusion is the Bible doesn't speak to biological origins.
Here, if I can quote you.
Wow.
Because I have it here.
So you can leave now.
Yeah, no, but I think this kind of captures it. I'd love you to expand on this because I think this is part of the thing we've talked about on this podcast for years. You write, I've suggested that one can accept the historical Adam without thereby making a decision about material human origins. This has the advantage of separating scientific elements, material human origins, from exegetical and theological elements, with the result that conflict between the claims of science and the claims of Scripture is minimized without compromise.
Exactly.
So,
Can you unpack that for me?
in other words, you can believe in the accounts of Genesis 1, 2, and 3, and in no way feel like you're not in line with what science may reveal. They can both be
They
true.
can exist together.
Right.
I'm trying to examine what claims does the Bible actually make, not which ones we have traditionally thought when we come at it from our modern or traditional viewpoints, but what claims does the Bible actually make? And we can be helped to see that when we look at it in the ancient world. When we look at those claims, then we discover that there are not competing claims made in the Bible on these kinds of issues. And therefore, there's some freedom. That doesn't mean the science is good science. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. But you can't say, I can't accept that science because the Bible says something contradictory.
You're actually saying something the Bible doesn't say at that point.
Exactly.
And people who respond immediately, but Paul says there's no death before the fall, and that animals didn't die, and that nothing died, and it was perfect. That world was perfect. Because you do make the point that it appears for your reading that when God says it is good, he's not saying it is perfect.
Again, Hebrew, the word for good is not the word for perfect.
And it's clear that when he gives the cultural mandate in Genesis 1, 27, 28, and he says, fill the earth and multiply and subdue it, that there is more that needs to be done to complete
There's
the goodness.
More chaos. There's a whole other topic
Yes.
of chaos.
Yeah.
and-
But
and
if the
order.
world was perfect, there would be nothing for Adam and Eve or whatever
subdue.
humans existed to do
Right.
except sit around and enjoy
Right.
paradise. But they are
Okay.
clearly called to cultivate more goodness out of the earth.
Wow.
This is so deep, my mind is hurting.
And we didn't even get to the garden or the trees or the serpent or anything.
Oh yeah, the
No,
sacred
you
space.
have to come back.
So we might have to have you back. Okay, we will get some feedback. Give us your feedback. What do you think about this? Do you think Dr. John Walton is out to lunch?
What are we having for lunch?
Figuratively or literally.
Too late. Sky already ate the oranges. So
Side
let
of
us
ribs.
know, and we will have him back and continue this discussion after we have a spring break. And I will try to summarize everything we just said.
Good luck.
Hey, buddy, can you conceive what Dr. John Walton said about Adam and Eve? Oh, do you think it's really possible that Adam and Eve were historical, but also archetypal, which is complicated, but I can pull your brain a little, and we can learn about death and sin and life and wisdom and trees and what else do we need? Chaos,
Dust,
order and disorder, and dust is all about mortality. Oh, I think that, come on.
That's a new reality.
Oh, that was brilliant. That's a new reality. And we learned a lot from John today. And hopefully he'll come back again after he briefly goes away. And you can give us your letters and we'll ask him to answer them profoundly. Thanks for coming, John.
Thanks
You're
so
welcome.
much.
Great to be
All
here.
right. See you all next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.